Well, good afternoon and welcome once again to Ed's Orchids. Now, this is a care collab video on slipper orchids. Well, as you know, there are two types of slipper orchids. There's the Paphiopedilums and the Fragmapediums. Now, as you all know, the Paphiopedilums come from the Far East. I'll not name all the countries. And the Fragmapediums come from South America, Mexico and places like that. Now then, what do they require? Well, we'll generalise to begin with, and then I'll go through some plants and I'll show them to you. Right, let's start off with light. Well, I give them all the same light. You read a lot of books and they say one needs more light than the others, some need it darker, especially on the Paphiopedilums, the ones with all the mottled leaves require it darker, but that's just to give them more of a vivid colour. Now, yeah, they both get the same light, a good intermediate light. Don't give them any sun, especially the Fragmapediums, because if they get full sun in the summer months, then it will really affect the leaves. It'll scorch them, burn them, and they'll look not very good. And you don't give sun to most of the Paphiopedilums, although the Philippinense will take a lot of sun. But we'll go into that later. Now, as far as temperatures are concerned, we just generalise. We give them what we can in summer and we keep them as warm as we can in winter. But for a rough idea, they'll stand temperatures up to, 30 centigrade and maybe a bit above, and they'll go down to sort of 8 to 12 centigrade. I mean, some of the Paphiopedilums will go lower than that, almost to freezing, but the Fragmapediums, I think their lowest probably will be about 12 or 13. Then we come to fertiliser. Well, you know, I fertilise these quite different from each other. I don't give them a lot, and the Fragmapediums, as you know from way gone times, that I use fish blood and bone just twice a year, teaspoonfuls sprinkled over the top of the compost and watered in, and that's all they get twice a year, and they seem to do pretty well on it. The Paphiopedilums require little bits of different things that I hope we'll come into later in this video. And then the medium you put them in. Well, I put them all in the same medium. I give them a nice medium bark, orchiate if I have it, but we find it more difficult to get now, and perlite. And that's all I use on both of them. I mean, a lot of people can put moss in with them, but as you know, I don't like moss. It's dead stuff, and no matter what people say, it will not come alive, and it just holds a lot of water, and it compacts, and that's where you get all your dead roots from, the moss. Now, if we're talking about live moss, that is a different proposition altogether, because if you're having any Paphiopedilums or Fragmapediums having a real struggle to get going, then give them live moss, and we'll come to that one later because I've got some in live moss. Right, having said all that, we've got a general idea of what they do like. We'll start having a look at a few plants. Well, we'll start off by looking at the Fragmapediums, and this is the Fragmapedium Fritz Schomburg. I mean, you're probably looking at the dead moss there, which I said I didn't like, but there comes a time when I do have to use it on occasions, and this was because with this being a cross between Cavachii and Bessii, it started growing out of the pot, and the roots there had nothing to get hold of. So I put this moss on very loosely to get the roots growing well. So we'll just take some of this off, and we'll see if, you see, it's only loose, it's not compacted at all, and we'll see if there's any roots growing. Can't see any yet. There'll be some somewhere. Come on. I always put this one back on because it's not... anyone growing there? No. Oh, there we are. There's a nice big root growing, nice and hairy big root. So that's doing its job, that's working properly. Now this is a 5 growth plant, and as I said, it flowers every year, and it's just in the medium bark and the perlite, like I've said before. So that's a Fritz Schomburg, absolutely beautiful flowers. The only thing is that the vast majority of them you get that when the buds open and you get the bloom, then after a couple of days the blooms on the petals they start going backwards and curling into each other, which really spoils them. So you look forward to looking at these blooms for months, and then it lasts a couple of days. But after all, they're well worth doing. Right, we'll just put this back onto them very lightly so as it won't compact. It's doing its job very nicely. It's nice and damp, and keep it nice and damp but airy. You've got to have plenty of air with it, and that'll do nicely. So that'll do for the Fritz Schomburg. Then we've got this Grandi, which is a multi-growth plant, and as you can see it's in the same medium there, and it's getting ready for cleaning up a little bit. And as you can see, the new growth there. What is there? 1, 2, 3. That's a new growth, that's 4, that's a little bit bigger. Another one coming down there, 5. Anything round the back? Yeah, and a nice new growth coming up round the back there. So I'll just keep an eye on that one and make sure all the growths grow, and that'll be a really big plant. And the only time you ever split these Fragmapediums really is when they get really multi-growth plants, and they'll need splitting. I mean, to go back to this Fritz Schomburg, you can see there that this plant and this plant are just held together by one root crossing there. And that, if that got nipped, you could do them separately, but I don't profess to do that just yet. And this one is a longifolium. It's a 7 growth plant, doing very well. A lot of the growths dying off, the old growths there, you can see where it's flowered from. So that'll be dying off shortly. This one here died off, and the only thing it's got on is one leaf. So that makes it not a 7 growth plant now, but much less. But the new growth is lovely. This is a nice new growth here. And if you can just hear, the heater has just come on because it's very cold. And nice new growth here. So that's doing very well for longifolium. And this is another Fragmapedium that's not quite as quick growing, this one. It's a cross between Grandi and Caudatum, I think. I'll just have a look at the label. Yep. And this gets really long petals on it. They could be up to 30 inches long on this one. So this has only flowered once for me, and as I say, it's slow growing, but the newest growth is does everything I need. And there's the newest growth there, and it's coming up with a nice new leaf there. So that should be beautiful once that one flowers. And then we've got some nice little ones here which I'm trying to grow on. This is what's this? Is a Garum Weaver, and it's doing very nicely. It's coming on quite nice. Got 1 or 2 nice new growths on it, but it's only probably a couple of years old, that one, but doing okay. And the last one I'll show you is this Fragmapedium cardinale, one of my favourites, absolutely beautiful. And this is a cross between Schlimii and something else. I've forgotten. It's not written on the back, but there's a bit of Schlimii in it, whether or not. And this looks like it's coming into spike, I've just noticed. You can see there, it's coming up with 2 leaves. And that's a sure sign that it's going to spike. Oh, that's lovely. I'm really pleased with that one. Anyhow, that concludes the Fragmapediums I'm showing you. If you have any questions, just ask them below and I'll answer them, if at all possible. So we'll now have a look at Paphiopedilums. And this one here is the first one I'll show you, which is a cross between Stonii and Rothschildianum, known as the Lady Isabel. And I've got 2 of these, and this is growing very nicely. It's a 3 growth plant, coming up with nice leaves there in the middle, little growth there coming up, and another one here with a nice growth leaf coming up. So that's doing very nicely. Very, very slow, these. You can't tell them move from one year to the next, but slowly they do, and eventually all of a sudden they'll shoot up with a bloom, if you're lucky. And most of these multiflorals are bred from Rothschildianum and Sandrianum. There are more species of multiflorals, but we'll not go into that just yet. Now these require a good light with sort of a dapple shade so that the leaves are in a good shade of green. If they get too much light, they're looking a bit yellowish, and if they get too dark, they're not getting enough light. I've talked about temperatures before, with these like a year-round high of just below 30, I mean year-round. With summer nights falling to around 16 centigrade. Winter temperatures for these, if I can remember rightly, can go down as low as 12. Well, they do in my greenhouse anyhow, so I'm presuming that's right. And the differential in these temperatures from sort of 30 down to 12 gives you a big fall, and this also helps in the production of new blooms. And in their natural environment, these Rothschildianum, Sandrianums, they all require a very high humidity. So if you're growing these in a greenhouse, any of these hybrids, make sure you have a humidity between about 60 and 80%. Now this one has no Rothschildianum or Sandrianum in it, and it's a cross between Lowii and Philippinense. So that tells you it needs plenty of water and plenty of heat, and it can tolerate a little bit of sun, this one. I've mentioned before about what I pot them in, you know, just a bit of medium bark and perlite. But a lot of growers like to add a little bit of that dead sphagnum to the media, which will help if the plant isn't getting enough humidity. But if it does get enough humidity, don't put any of that stuff in. I just don't like it. I mean, I personally don't do this because I'm not a lover of the dead mosses. Now these multiflorals require a media which is slightly alkaline. So you can put crushed shells in with this if you want, in these if you like, but I prefer just watering with a little bit of calcium nitrate, and make sure there's whatever you fertiliser you're using them, make sure there's plenty of calcium in it, because they do like that alkaline in the bottom medium, but they also like to be watered and fed with an acidic fertiliser. And the big difference between these Paphiopedilums and Fragmapediums is the watering. As you know, the Fragmapediums, you can water them every day in summer and 2 or 3 times a week in winter. And they love their feet being wet. But Paphiopedilums are a little bit different. If you keep their feet too wet, then they will rot. They need to have a slight dampness there all the time. And if you let them dry out for 1 day or 2 days, I wouldn't think that would do them any harm. Now, as regards feeding, as I mentioned before, you can use any commercial fertiliser. On these I generally use rain mix, which is very good, mixed with my RO water. Then I can tell how much I'm giving it, and I give them anything up to, these Paphiopedilums, up to about 400, depending on the size of the plant. And a good way to do these, for if you're fertilising them often, is to flush them the same day as you fertilise them. Because when you fertilise them, the roots will take up as much fertiliser as they require, and the rest will be left in the pot. So if you flush these the same day as you fertilise them, then you'll reap the benefits. But in winter they will definitely need less watering because the light's not strong enough or long enough. You know, and you can refrain from giving them fertiliser altogether if you wish, but if they're still growing, just give them a little bit, but not too much. Now, mature plants such as this should flower probably once every 2 years once they started. If you've got sort of half-grown plants, that'll take 4 or 5 years. And if you're growing from seedlings, you can reckon up to about 12 years before you can find any blooms. Now we come up to the smaller Paphiopedilums, and we'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone here, because they're both in live moss, because they weren't doing much. But they've been in here for about a month in this live moss, and they seem to be doing fine. And the only thing I do is, when I can see the top of the moss is totally dried out, then I just give it a very light spray in and make sure the water doesn't fall all the way through the bottom. So that's all I do with these at the moment, and it seems to be working well. Now this one is a very popular plant that you never ever see in blooming shows. Well, I never see them except when the international growers used to come over, you know, before Brexit, and we used to see some lovely blooms of this Paphiopedilum. Now this one has got many growths on it. It's got at least 4, and it's not flowered yet. So I'm hoping this moss will help it to flower. Now, to tell you something about these, then they're found in the wild, growing in leaf moss between calcareous rocks. This plant doesn't like a lot of light, but it does like 10 hours of the light it's getting every day. We always grow these in pots, which are just big enough to put the roots in. And this is another one you could add a few crushed shells in, because they do like it to be a little alkaline. You know, eggshells will do fine. So just make sure all the roots are in contact with the media. And this plant is one of those that will stand the temperature down to 11 or 12, and it will go up as high as 26, 27. Like most Paphiopedilums, they do require a little winter rest. So you don't give it any fertiliser and a very limited supply of water. And this should, especially on Paphiopedilum, it should sort of induce spiking in the spring or summer. Now this one is a Delanatu, which is very popular. This wasn't doing too well, and I as I say, it's only been in a month and these were just starting to grow in, but they've come on well in a month, and it's got 2 growths there coming up. So hopefully we can see some blooms off this next year. Well, this is one of the Philippinenses I was talking about, and this comes from the same terrain as the Bellatulums. Now this is a 3 growth plant, it's doing very nicely. I keep this indoors, and it's coming up some nice new growth there, but once again these Paphiopedilums are very slow, and I keep this indoors under the Mars Hydro light to give it plenty of light and plenty of heat. And after you've given these a slight winter rest, you can start giving them a little bit more nitrogen to promote growth in the early spring, and then change sort of in the middle of summer or the start of summer, change to a high phosphorus growth, and this should ensure flowering, you know, when it gets fully mature. Well, this is a fine plant, isn't it? It's a Paphiopedilum, and there's no proper name to it yet. It's a cross between Rothschildianum, it's a cross between Enchantress, Kurtzii, and Rothschildianum, that's it. And it was given to me a couple of months ago, that the owner couldn't do anything with it. He said he's flowered once since he's had it and never flowered since. And that must be 3 or 4 years, but he's given it me to look after, so I'm definitely looking after it, and it's putting up some nice new leaf growth in the middle, but no signs of any spiking yet, but we'll keep an eye on that one. I mean, the flowers on that should be quite nice. Well, we'll finish this collab video on slippers now, and if you haven't noticed, I've got the beer in the trays here for the slugs. Put it out yesterday, come in last night about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and found 5 slugs. Only the small ones, about 1/2 inch long, but if I'd have left them much longer, they'd have certainly grown. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give me the thumbs up, and thank you to all my subscribers, and until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.